Okay, welcome to our share, Parshas Vayeira, Tavshin Pei Aleph. And Baruch Hashem, we're going to build a little bit on what we said last week, and we had a Yesod, and I'd like to take that Yesod somewhat to the next level and make it very timely and relevant to our time. Pasuk tells us, Vayeira Lov Hashem, Beilone Mamre, V'yoshev Pesach Oyel K'chaim Hayom. And of course, Avram Avinu was sitting in the opening of the tent, and as Rashi tells us, he was waiting for guests. He was waiting to see some guests. And it's interesting, it points out that he was Yoshev B'Oyel. He was sitting in the Pesach Oyel. He was sitting in the opening of the tent. What is the significance of sitting in the opening of the tent? Just say he was sitting by the tent, and he was there. How do we understand the Yoshev Pesach Oyel? Of course, we say to Greek guests. So I'd like to add a little bit, maybe a little bit of Nakuda based on last week. If you remember last week, we told the story of Rabbi Levin, who was passing by the Chabina Rebbe's house, and he was standing, and he was crying, and he was seeking, somehow he's davening. And they said to him, "What are you doing? Why are you standing outside Chabina Rebbe's house?" And he said, "I can't go to the Kaisel, because we're not allowed to go to the Kaisel in that Tekufa. And I'm looking for the Kedusha. And the Kedusha is by the Chabina Rav's house, who does all this chesed, and so much Torah goes from him. So it's like being by the Kaisel." And we brought a yesod from that therefore a person can know when he's by the tzaddik, he sits by the tzaddik's house, the tzaddik's house is like the Kaisel. And even today it's like that. We said, and that's why Avram Avinu went, Lech lecha mi'aretz l'milad beis avicha, and we said that Avram Avinu was told to go all over the place. Like we said, a person doesn't know where he's going, he goes everywhere. So Avram Avinu was going to go, and he was going to show people where he is, and everywhere he goes, the tzaddik is there, and there's Kedusha there, and we want to bring Kedusha to every place, and that's the tzaddik's job, is to travel and to bring Kedusha to different places. And we see that by Shmuel HaNavi. It says that Shmuel HaNavi used to travel all over Eretz Yisrael, and he used to bring Kedusha. So I'd like to add to that with a story that we told a few weeks ago from Ramotel Pargamansky, who was once going on a train together with another person, and they were learning Torah, and they missed their stop. And they needed to stay over in the town overnight until the train would go back to where they were. It was going to take them a long time. And the other person said, "Rabbi, we got lost." And Ramatel said, "A Yid is kein mol nicht verblondet." A Jew is never lost. If we're in this city, there's got to be a reason. There's got to be some reason that HaKadosh Baruch Hu sent us here. And sure enough, the end of the story was that they went to the shul, and in the shul there was a great tumult when they got there. And sure enough, what happened is there was a bris milah, and the moil didn't show up, and the other person was a moil, and he was able to make bris milah. So Ramatel turned to him and said, "You see that the Rebbeinu Shalom a Yid's never verblundet, because wherever a person is, the Rebbeinu Shalom sending him there for a reason." And that was the story that we told. But based upon this, I'd like to say maybe I can say pshat the Ramatel Pargamansky couldn't say, because he was an onav. But maybe I'm thinking that the reason they had to be there, of course that's what happened, but even if they had not had a bris milah, maybe the reason they were there is because it needed the Kedusha of Ramatel to be there. That Ramatel's being in that place brought a certain Kedusha. So even if nothing happened, there's a reason for the tzaddik to go there, just to bring his Kedusha. Just like we said, that when you're sitting by the house of the tzaddik, the Chabina Rav, or like the Yerushalmi we brought from that Rebbe Eliezer, that it says, "Dir Hashem b'matzah karov b'yosek." What does it mean, karov b'yosek karav? Call him when he's near. It means he's near in the house. He's in the house of Rebbe Eliezer, because the tzaddik's house. So I'm thinking that maybe Ramatel had to be there because he was going to bring his Kedusha there. It was a bonus that something good happened. And with this, I think we can answer all the Rebbe Shemaises. There's so many maises that you hear when you read the Divrei Tzadikim, and they go in one of two ways. Either the Rebbe calls him the Chassid, Baal Shem Tov calls him, he says, "You got to go to a certain place." And he doesn't know why. And the person goes to the place, and he's looking, he doesn't know. And then somehow he comes across, he hears a weak cry, and he goes in, and it turns out a lady just gave birth, and she has nothing to eat, she has no straw, and he helps her and he helps the baby and he saved their life, and now he knows why the Rebbe sent him. And the other story is that the person's going to the Rebbe for Rosh Hashanah, and the horse dies and the wagon breaks down, and he ends up in some little dorfel for Rosh Hashanah, and he ends up taking the minyan. You know the stories. I don't have to tell you the stories. But I would like to say that based upon what we're saying is that even if he went and nothing happened, maybe the reason Tzaddik sent him, the Rebbe sent him, or the Gadol sent him, is because he needed to be there to bring Kedusha to that place. And every place he goes, a person brings Kedusha. And it's not just a Tzaddik, because Baruch Hashem, in every single Yid lays a certain Kedusha. And maybe he had to be there, not because something was going to happen, not because there was going to be some amazing Maisa, but just the fact that he was in that place brought the Kedusha, that place of a Yid, the Heiler Kedusha of a Yid, and the Yid needed to be in that place, and that's why the Rebbe sent him. So we answered all Rebbe Shemaises. Avada something, the stories here something happened, but many times maybe nothing happened. Doesn't matter. That's not, the Rebbe sent him, so he should be there. And that's nafkamina. And we find it all over, that when a person goes somewhere, he can make a difference. The Arizal says that the reason we have to go into Golus, and we have to be in all the different countries, is because in each country we go, we bring the Kedusha to that country. And it's a very interesting thing, because at some point the Yidden, unfortunately, they leave the country, they get thrown out of the country. And the truth is, even here in the United States, there have been neighborhoods where there were Yidden neighbor, and then they went to a more affluent neighborhood, they went to a different neighborhood. Maybe the pshat was that the Yidden had to bring Kedusha, and that's what the Arizal says. They have to be in all the 70 nations, one by one, each place to bring the Kedusha to that place. Because a Yid has within him an intrinsic Kedusha. Avada, Gadol has within him that Kedusha. But every Yid has a certain Kedusha to him. So each one we're being sent, we're being placed, and each one we're bringing that Kedusha. And that's why perhaps in all these Maisas the Yid had to be there. And that's why sometimes we get verblunged ourselves, and we go to different places and we don't understand, why did we end up, we got lost, and we ended up over here and over there. And you never know. Somebody told me a story that, which has a svar in it. It said there was somebody that was waiting, there was a long line after the World Trade Center came down. The PATH trains there were very few trains, and the lines were literally around the block. And a certain Yid came along, and he saw that the line was big, and he could have slipped in the middle. He thought it was an airlift, he went to the back of the line. And later on, somebody told that person, he said, you made a huge Kiddush Hashem. Because I was standing with all the goyim in that line, and they were watching you. They were watching, and they knew that you were going there. And when they saw that you saw that there was lines started in the back, and you went to the back, mamish, they were in the spoil. Because you could have slipped it. So that's where there's an answer to the story. But maybe the answer was he had to be there just so that they could see a Yid. Who knows? We don't know why. But we know that wherever the Rebbeinu Shalom sends us, the Rebbeinu Shalom is sending us for a reason. And then COVID hit. And COVID came, and it turned the paradigm on its head. And very interestingly, I was thinking that, we're not able to go places. We can't bring the Kedusha of a Yid to different places. We're sitting at home. But maybe that's also the Rebbeinu Shalom's ratzon. The Rebbeinu Shalom wants that every single Yid should, because when you're in one place for a long time, the Kedusha becomes, more eingezapt. You stay over one night, okay, a certain amount of Kedusha comes, and that's it, and that's, but a person stays in one place, so there's another svara. That's why they asked the Kasha, it says what you said by Shmuel HaNavi, that Shmuel used to travel around to all different places, and his sons were criticized that they didn't do it. There's other Gedolei Torah, and we find that they didn't travel around. And the answer is that both are true. Sometimes you need to go and bring Kedusha to different places. But sometimes you need to bring the Kedusha to where you are. Sometimes you need to focus on where you are, and not just looking around and moving around. So maybe what the COVID taught us is that maybe we needed to be in one place. Maybe we need to spend more time with our spouse. Maybe we need to spend more time with our kids. Maybe we needed more time to spend with ourselves. Maybe we need time to learn. So instead of going on Pesach, let's say, to all the different Mekaimis, we're home. Maybe HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted us to bring the Kedusha into our own house. So maybe that's what He wanted from us. So sometimes the Rebbeinu Shalom wants us to travel to bring Kedusha elsewhere, and the Gadol goes all over. Sometimes He wants the Gadol to be in one place. And He wants us to be all over. Sometimes He wants us to be in one place. And that's the lesson I think that the COVID has taught us. That the Rebbeinu Shalom said, maybe he said, Rabbi, you're moving around too much. You got too mobile. Time to dig in, time to be at home, time to bring that Kedusha to your own place. And therefore we find, as we said before, that by Shmuel HaNavi, that his children were criticized, and the shaila is, but other Gedolim didn't do it. So why did they criticize children? And the answer is because their father did that malach. So a child has an inyan of going in the derech of his father. To everybody talked to him, why do you do this? Tata zegeton. People mamish hold on. The tata zegeton is mamish gold. So chashuv. That's the kiyum of Klal Yisrael. The Messiah has been because people hold on so fast. The tata zegeton. So the children of Shmuel were criticized. Why didn't you do like the tata? The tata is a zegeton. He held that shita. But there's others who don't. Others, or that wasn't the circumstance. One Gadol's circumstances are this, and one Gadol's circumstances are that. Sometimes you need to be here, and sometimes you be there. And I think that's the lesson that with Parshas Lech Lecha and Parshas Vayeira. In Parshas Lech Lecha, HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Avram Avinu, Lech Lecha mi'atzim lanu beis avi l'eretz asher eka. I'm not going to tell you where you're going to go. So you should be farblunget. You should go everywhere and bring your Kedusha everywhere. But there's also a time that Hashem said to Avram, V'hu yoshev pesach oil k'chaim hayayim. Vayeira lav Hashem. Be in one place, and there's gezap the Kedusha. What does Rashi tell us from traveling? It's a mayat piriv. It's a person's. It's hard. So but sometimes you got to go. Sometimes you have to travel. Sometimes you have to be at home. And that's the lesson of these two parshas. And that's the first pasuk of both parshas. Beautiful. Lech lecha, Avram Avinu, bring your Kedusha everywhere. But sometimes, v'hu yoshev pesach ha'oil k'chaim hayayim. And that's what we see in the Midbar. When the Yidden traveled, sometimes they traveled to they went to all 42 masos. But so many of them were in one place. Because sometimes you need to be in one place, and sometimes you need to be in many places. And only the Rebbeinu Shalom knows the answer. Why we're placed here and why we're placed there. Why were you born in this city and you were born in that city, or this neighborhood and that neighborhood. Who you dealt with, who you didn't deal with. All of these are chesronos of Rebbeinu Shalom. But we can feel comforted that if HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us the COVID, as difficult as it is, but one of the lessons of it is, V'hu yoshev pesach oil k'chaim hayayim. When there's heat, when there's fever, when there's heat, we're staying in one place. Yoshev Pesach ha'oil. So sometimes we need Lech Lecha, and sometimes we need Yoshev Pesach ha'oil. The Rebbe should help us, that He should take us in all the places we need to go. And sometimes home, sometimes abroad, sometimes here, sometimes there. But we know, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes us somewhere, there's always a reason for it. Should all have a wonderful, wonderful Shabbos. And Mitzvah Hashem should bring an end to all of this tzaras, and Klal Yisrael should once again be able to be mekayim all the things that they need. The kinderlach should be able to all be back in school. The Yidden should all be back in the shuls when they can, and everybody should be gesund and stark. A gitten Shabbos.